Hello, and welcome to the Megan Taylor Creative Podcast, a show for entrepreneurs looking to grow their business with digital marketing. In this episode, I'll be talking about SEO, what it is, and how to use it to grow your business. Let's get started. So in this episode of the Megan Taylor Creative Podcast, I just wanted to sit and talk about SEO, and I'm excited to actually say that this is the first episode of a new series that I will be doing on the podcast, which is essentially going to be digital marketing for beginners. A lot of my clients that I bring on board here at Megan Taylor Creative, some of them have a vague understanding of the fundamentals of digital marketing, but not all of them necessarily understand it fully. So I kind of wanted to share with you all of the knowledge that I've kind of learned over the years, just through education and also through experience, which I'll get onto. But personally, I feel like experience is the most important aspect if you want to do well in digital marketing. And obviously, whilst a paid role would be great, you can obviously make your own opportunities thanks to online marketing and I guess the more entrepreneurial spirit that people are starting to embody. So yeah, I just really wanted to talk about SEO because it's one of the most important digital marketing channels and one of the first channels that I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs go to because it's low cost and it's also very effective if you get it right. But I feel like a lot of people also give up on it very easily, and that's because they don't have the foundational knowledge or a firm understanding of how SEO works, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. So yeah, as always, I'm just going to get straight into it. So just to give you an understanding of how this episode is going to be broken up, here's what we will actually be covering. What is SEO, on-page SEO, off-page SEO, and technical SEO. We'll also be exploring how SEO affects your content as well. So let's start with an overview of what SEO actually is. SEO stands for search engine optimization, and it is essentially a tactic that digital marketers have been using essentially since the dawn of the internet, but got increasingly popular, I would say, like in the early to mid noughties. And essentially it is the practice of optimizing web pages to increase visibility on search engines. And there are a few technical aspects of SEO that are really kind of important to understand if you want to do it well. So let's start with how search engines actually work. The most commonly known search engine available is Google, but we also have things like Pinterest, which is a search engine as well, and also YouTube, which is owned by Google, is thought of as a search engine too. And essentially the way that search engines work is that they will have web crawlers who crawl billions of web pages to search for the most relevant topics for a specific search term. And these web crawlers are commonly known in the industry as search engine spiders or bots, who will then, every time they enter a web page, they will follow links on these pages to essentially discover any new or relevant content that's also been created. And you may be familiar with this process, but it's something to bear in mind that Google is obviously actively looking at content each and every day. So it's really important to remember that, and to remember that although these web crawlers are going to be actively searching for content, they're going to be searching for the best content to actually show their users. And pages will they be indexed too, and you will know that if you've ever tried to set up a new website, you know how important this is for actually getting the ball rolling in terms of actually getting your content visible, because if your page isn't indexed, then you won't be able to rank in search, essentially, because the best way I like to describe it is it will be invisible. So you can as well like choose to have certain pages on your website actually not indexed as well. So this is really important if you have like a membership website and you have like private pages or any pages that will feature sensitive information as well. I know, for example, with the web hosting platform that I use, Wix, you have the option to click on or off about whether you want an actual web page to be indexed, which is really useful, especially the more clients I bring on. I have a subscriptions area that allows me to manage that, and those pages have all of my clients' information, so I don't want that to be shown to the general public or across my website. And just to give you a brief understanding of what indexing actually is, indexing is essentially just Google putting your web page onto the search engine. It's literally that simple. There's obviously a lot more technical stuff that goes into it, but that's the basics of indexing. Now that I've actually explained more about what SEO is and how it works specifically in the context of Google, which is probably the search engine that most people are going to be familiar with, let's actually move on to on-page SEO. And on-page SEO is, I feel like, the pillar of SEO that most people are going to be familiar with, because it is essentially to do with optimizing content on a web page. And on-page SEO can be as simple or as complex as you make it. I think that most people who create content understand that SEO plays a massive part in actually increasing the visibility of their content, and so they must spend time to optimize their content in the best way that they can. And there's lots of different practices that you can follow for on-page SEO, but I would say that the most commonly used tactics for on-page SEO are things like including keywords that you want to rank for in your title. I usually like to include the primary and secondary keyword. You'll also want to include the keyword that you're trying to rank for in the introduction, so like the first couple of lines of your content, as that will give Google a better chance of understanding what your content is about and thus what phrase or what search phrases, so the keywords, it should be associated with. And then obviously you want to start including lots of different keywords that are relevant, so keyword variations and things like that, which are just different ways of phrasing your content essentially. And one thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to optimizing your content is that when you write your content and you're thinking about the keywords that you're including, it's really important to remember that Google is very smart. Sometimes you don't actually have to say like the exact keyword that you're wanting to rank for. Again, this is where like variations come in. I think Google's a lot smarter than people kind of remember sometimes. And like I said, we literally have lots of different things going on to ensure that the user gets the best experience. So I would be loose with it sometimes. And I think that whilst you do obviously want to have the exact phrase in your content, don't go out of your way to change a sentence necessarily just to fit that keyword in if you feel like it's going to make the sentence read clunky and robotic, because that won't come across well to your user. And you have to remember that you're writing content for your users, not just for Google. And I've kind of touched on this a lot with the Megan Taylor Creative Podcast, but just remember that when you're optimizing your content, it's a fine balance, and the creative content marketing methodology should help you with that. And I do also have an episode where I explore those principles in great detail, so I'll link that in the show notes too. But yes, that is kind of the very basic principles of on-page SEO, and I would always be updating this on your website. I would make sure that you're following the best practices, and things like your meta descriptions and your alt text on images are consistently updated. You're also gonna want to remember things like internal linking as well. And internal linking helps you to implement the EAT methodology, which stands for expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And this concept initially came from Google's search policy rater guidelines. now we've covered on-page SEO, let's talk about technical SEO. And this is, I guess, one of the pillars that people are less familiar with because it is quite technical and it's not something that people who are new to SEO necessarily consider. I think that technical SEO is very important, but I think that there's so many great website hosts, for example, who kind of already do this for you, or at least kind of give you some serious pointers into how you can improve on this aspect. So just to define what technical SEO is, it's essentially the practice of implementing optimizations into a website that help search engine spiders crawl and index your site more effectively. And this will in turn help to improve your organic rankings. A big part of technical SEO is essentially, well, it's two things. It's firstly ensuring that your website offers a good user experience, but it also ensures that your website is optimized to the point where it's so easy for Google to actually find your content. And there are lots of different factors that play into this. So things like on the user experience side, things like broken links, which can disrupt the user experience. This can really impact how a user perceives your website and whether it's actually trustworthy or not. Every time a user clicks on your website, they need to have a flawless experience. And Google will kind of be able to pick up on these factors, these what they call ranking factors, and that will essentially impact how trustworthy, authoritative, for example, your website actually is. So another part of that is also like website speed too, and this is something that a lot of business owners overlook. And this is where using like a website host like Bluehost or GoDaddy, for example, using website hosts like that can actually harm your chances of having a good user experience and thus harm your chances of your website ranking well in organic search too. Because obviously with your website, if it takes too long for a user to actually go onto your website, they're going to click off essentially. So it's just like a red flag for Google. If your website takes more than 3 seconds to load, then that's going to be really detrimental to how much traffic you get, how many people actually stay on your site and consume your content as intended. And actually it should really be about 2 seconds, and obviously that's like a second difference, but it's just to kind of show you how important that factors is. And again, we also need to talk about things like optimized images. So you need to think about the format of the image, but also the size of the image and the file as well. So if it's like a JPEG or a PNG, this could have a direct impact on your site speed as well. You have too many large image or video files as well. Video also fits into this category, then you will really be having a hard time trying to get users to use your site and have a good experience with it. And the last factor that I wanted to talk about for experiences actually is your website mobile friendly. And I think that having a mobile friendly website is something that's so easy to do nowadays that if you do overlook it, then it really impacts how much your users actually trust your website, because it signals to them that you're not catering for the user that favors searching the internet on their phone. So I would spend a lot of time doing this and just making sure that the little details are right, because it's the little details that the users will pick up on, and you'd be surprised at how much that can impact their experience as well. The final pillar of SEO is off-page SEO, and this is perhaps the pillar that I've had the second most experience with, because I've had a lot of experience with creating backlinks and also guest posts as well, and leveraging social media to get mentions and just building your credibility. So it's all about essentially activities that you do outside of your website to build that trust. And it's essentially a share or a link. A backlink is a vote of confidence that Google can use to realize that, okay, yes, this is a trustworthy website. If other people are linking to it, then that is a sign that you can trust it to. So don't overlook this step either. I would start working on this from the very beginning of your business and make sure that you're building that momentum around your business, that buzz around your business on social media, on Google search. Make sure that you're creating content that's shareable and is going to encourage this kind of activity, because otherwise you will also struggle to rank in organic search, because backlinks and just general off-page SEO is incredibly important to ensuring that your content is trusted by Google. So now that I've given you a brief rundown of how SEO actually works, let's now talk about how this actually impacts your content and your overall content strategy. And content strategy is something that Megan Taylor Creative, I've spoken about this before on the podcast, but we specialize in, and it's something that I'm really passionate about and something that I think people overlook because or get confused with, because I think that people think content strategy is tactics, and that's not true. You can't execute tactics without having a strategy in place first, and the strategy is essentially working out what tactics and why behind those tactics. And if SEO is important to your business, I would actually kind of mix it together. So make sure that your content accounts for the fact that you will be implementing SEO tactics to increase the visibility of your website and to start growing your business online. The first thing that I would do is spend some time generating topic ideas. And if you're doing this through the mindset of, yes, SEO is something that I want to do for my business and for business growth, then I would actually do some searches on Google and see what real phrases are being searched for in the auto feature, so the search auto feature. There's also suggestions at the bottom of every search page as well, so you can kind of see like real life suggestions, and these will be the questions that your target audience are legitimately asking. So I would really pay attention to those, and then I would look at what your competitors are doing and see how they're optimizing their content too, and where they're positioning themselves in organic search. So you can use things like Ahrefs to do a site explore, and then you can also just see things like their domain rating, which is essentially how much authority they have, and you can see how many backlinks they have, and you can see the sort of keywords that they rank for as well, and their content too, which is really insightful and should really help you to inform your content strategy, because if that's what your competitors are doing, then clearly something is right. But obviously it's important to think about what's right for your business and remember your target audience and the nuances that they will likely have between your target audience and your competitor target audience too. So I would really bear that in mind. And once you kind of found your keywords and found some content ideas, I would just look at the competition and the search volume to see if it's really viable. So viable in a sense that, are you going to be able to rank for this given your current position in Google in terms of your domain rating and just your overall authority? Because there's no point in ranking for something that everyone's trying to rank for, that the big players who have already built all of this and already have the trust, they're going to get first dibs on actual ranking essentially on the first page of Google because they built that trust. So you don't want to target those sorts of keywords. You want to target long tail keywords that are still highly relevant and highly targeted, but they may have lower search volumes. But the thing is that because they're so targeted, people that are searching for those really have like a strong search intent, and those are the sort of users that you will want to bring into your website in the early days, because they will be looking for something very specific, and if you can provide them with that, then that's going to really help you instill trust in the early days. I would also at this point think about shareability and how you can start to generate momentum and build a community on social media and outside of your website. So think about the sort of content that, you know, other people would want to share and other people would want to link to on their website. I find that things like infographics and data-driven content can really help for that. And there's lots of different ways that you can do this. In the early days, you can check for broken links, and then if you found a broken link on a website, you can contact whoever runs the website and just say, hey, I found that this link is broken, but I have a replacement link for you, which I would be happy for you to link to. And that's just a really simple way that you can proactively engage trust while you start waiting for the mentions and the shares and the likes to. And obviously, whilst all of this is going on, remember things like user experience and the technical aspect of SEO, and just ensuring that you set your website up for success and that the crawl bots will be able to find it as well. So just to remember that all of this needs to work together. You can't have one without the other. If you don't think about all three at one time, that your content is not going to stand a chance of success. So yeah, that's it. That's everything to say. As always, I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I'd like to explore a little bit more about SEO in the future, but this was just a very, very basic rundown of how everything actually works. I think it's so important sometimes as marketers, we get so carried away with the latest trends and what's going on that it's really easy to forget about the basics of what we're actually doing and how to actually make everything work together. And SEO is unfortunately one of those areas of marketing where people can fall privy to that. So just remember that all three of those pillars must work together for success. You need kind of someone to execute, especially on-page SEO, and create a content strategy that's going to be optimized and going to account for SEO. Then please contact Megan Taylor Creative. We have a contact form which you can fill in on our website where you can share with us your requirements, or just contact me on Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn as well. I have both a company and personal profile page. I'll leave all the details in the show notes. So yeah, as always, if you liked this episode, please like and share on social media. Tag me on Twitter or Instagram. My handle is at Megan LJ Taylor on both platforms. And also, if you're listening on Spotify, please follow us so that you can be notified every time we upload a new episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, obviously subscribe and turn the notification bell on so that you know whenever we upload a new episode over there. So yes, thank you so much. I'm really excited about this new series that I'm doing on my channel. I get really excited talking about the basics of marketing because this stuff is so simple, but once you understand it, it's so instrumental to creating really well thought out and effective marketing campaigns. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye.